Buy one, save two. The cowboy rescued both Apache sisters and exposed a deadly conspiracy. The sun had barely risen over the dusty horizon when the cowboy rode slowly along the edge of the canyon. The early light painted the rocks in golden and orange hues, and the wind whispered through the dry grass. He was a man of few words, known by the people in the nearby town as strong, quiet, and trustworthy. Everyone who had seen him in action knew that he could handle almost anything that came his way. He was not a hero in the usual sense. He did not seek attention or applause. But if trouble came, he would face it without hesitation. His name was Jack Hayes. People often called him the Lone Cowboy, not because he liked to be alone, but because circumstances had always led him to travel his path by himself. He had grown up on a ranch far from the town, learning how to ride horses, track animals, and read the signs in nature. Life had taught him patience, careful observation, and the importance of trust. He carried a few old tools and a well-worn rifle, but mostly he relied on his wits, instincts, and the quiet strength he had built over the years. That morning, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that he could not ignore. The birds seemed quieter, the wind sharper. As he rode near the canyon's edge, he noticed tire tracks in the dust that were fresh. They led toward a narrow path between the rocks, a place where few dared to go. Jack stopped his horse and studied them carefully. They were too large to belong to ordinary ranchers and too new to have been left by local traders. Something was going on, something hidden from ordinary eyes. Jack had heard rumors in town over the past few days. People spoke in hushed tones about two Apache sisters who had gone missing. They had lived quietly in the outskirts, learning traditional ways from their family while also attending school in the town. The older sister was careful and clever, always thinking 2 steps ahead. The younger sister was brave and sometimes acted without thinking, but her courage inspired everyone who knew her. Both were well-liked and respected, and their disappearance had shaken the town. Most of the townspeople were worried but unwilling to get involved. The sheriff, a man more interested in keeping peace than chasing shadows, seemed reluctant to investigate. He claimed he did not have enough evidence, and besides, there were other matters in town that demanded attention. But Jack knew better. He had seen enough in his life to know that sometimes justice did not come from waiting. It came from those willing to act, even when the odds were against them. He tied his horse near a large boulder, making sure it was hidden from view, and crept closer to the path the tracks led to. His eyes scanned the rocks and the shadows. From a distance he could see the faint outlines of a convoy of men moving along the narrow canyon trail. They wore masks to hide their faces and carried supplies in covered wagons. Something about their movements felt practiced, organized, and dangerous. They were not ordinary travelers. They had a purpose, and it was not good. Jack crouched behind a rock and observed them carefully. He could see 2 young girls in the distance, partially hidden by the wagons and guards. His heart sank as he realized they were likely the missing sisters. He felt a surge of determination. He had never met the girls personally, but their courage and innocence mattered to him. No one deserved to be held against their will, and Jack had made a silent promise to himself. He would do whatever it took to bring them back safely. As he watched, he also noticed something more alarming. Among the men were individuals who did not belong to any known gang or local group. The clothing was different, and their behavior suggested connections beyond the town. Jack's mind raced. Could this be part of a larger scheme? Was there more at stake than just 2 missing girls? The thought made him even more determined. Whatever the danger, he would face it. He had to. The morning passed slowly as he followed their trail at a safe distance. The canyon was treacherous, filled with jagged rocks, steep slopes, and hidden drops. Only someone who knew the land well could navigate it safely, and Jack did. He moved quietly, careful not to alert the kidnappers. Every sound, every movement mattered. He could hear the sisters whispering to each other, trying to stay calm despite fear. He saw their eyes wide with worry, but also saw the sparks of resilience in them. They were not broken. They were surviving, and that gave him hope. By midday, Jack found a small ridge that offered a clear view of the path ahead. From this vantage point, he could see the men stopping, setting up a temporary camp. It was risky, but he took note of the layout, where the guards were stationed, how the wagons were positioned, and where the girls were kept. Knowledge would be his greatest weapon. Rushing in without a plan could cost lives. Patience was as important as courage. As he sat behind a boulder hiding from view, Jack's thoughts drifted briefly to his past. He had faced danger many times before. Wild animals, storms, rival ranchers, but never had he felt such a heavy responsibility. These were not strangers to him. They were children, sisters, and their future depended on his actions. He tightened his grip on the reins of his horse and took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. Jack also realized he would need help, even if just a little. The town could not be entirely ignored, and there were a few trustworthy allies who could assist if he needed proof or backup. But he could not afford mistakes. The men he was watching were smart, organized, and ruthless. Any sudden movement could alert them, and the girl's safety was his first priority. He resolved to remain hidden until he fully understood the situation, and then make his move with precision. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, and the heat began to rise. Jack did not eat, did not drink, and did not rest. His eyes never left the convoy. He noticed the way the guards communicated through hand signals, the way they moved the girls carefully from one area to another. Every detail mattered. Every observation could be the difference between success and disaster. Finally, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the canyon, Jack saw an opening. One of the guards had left his post momentarily, and the girls were momentarily unattended near a wagon. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He did not act impulsively. He waited, calculating the best way to reach them without causing alarm. The canyon was unforgiving, and any mistake could lead to tragedy. He spoke softly to himself, a habit when planning in solitude. Stay calm. Watch the shadows. Wait for the right moment. He had learned long ago that patience was more powerful than haste. The girls needed him to be steady, and he needed them to be safe. He made a mental map of the terrain, noting escape routes, hiding places, and possible obstacles. Every move had to be perfect. As evening approached, the men began to settle in for the night. Fires were lit, the wagons arranged to form a crude barrier, and the guards relaxed slightly. Jack saw his chance. The shadows grew longer, providing cover for a quiet approach. He took a final glance at the girls who were whispering again, unaware that their rescuer was near. He felt a deep surge of determination. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He moved silently through the rocks, careful not to disturb the sand or make a sound. His horse followed at a distance, tied to a sturdy tree, ready for a quick getaway if needed. Jack's eyes never left the sisters, and he measured every step, every breath. The canyon was alive with danger, but he had faced worse. He had always found a way to protect those who could not protect themselves. By the time the sun disappeared behind the western hills, Jack was in position. He could reach the girls if he moved carefully. The guards were distracted by the fire and the setting sun. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. He knew that courage alone was not enough. He needed precision, timing, and an unwavering focus on the girls' safety. As darkness fell, Jack prepared to make his move. The canyon, silent except for the crackling of the fire, seemed to hold its breath. Everything depended on him. One wrong step could end the chance to save the sisters. But Jack Hayes, the lone cowboy, had never failed when others relied on him. He was ready. He had the skill, the courage, and the determination to face whatever came next. And he would not rest until the sisters huddled together inside the dimly lit compound, their hands tightly clasped. The older sister, Lila, whispered softly to her younger sister, Anaya, trying to calm her trembling. The walls around them were rough and cold, made of heavy logs that blocked almost all light. Outside, the voices of the guards echoed, their laughter harsh and unsettling. The sisters did not know if anyone was watching, so they stayed close to each other, moving only when it was safe. Lila was the more cautious of the two. She had always been careful, thinking ahead, planning for every possible danger. She could sense when something was wrong, and in this situation every instinct screamed at her to be alert. Anaya, on the other hand, was brave, sometimes recklessly so, but her courage inspired Lila. Together they formed a quiet, unspoken partnership. Lila's careful mind and Anaya's daring spirit balanced each other perfectly. Days had passed since their capture, and the sisters had learned to move in the shadows, avoiding the guards' attention. They whispered to each other about the world outside, about home, and about freedom. Lila carefully observed the guards, noting their patterns and weaknesses. She realized that while some were strong and disciplined, others were careless, leaving small openings that could be used to their advantage. The sisters were not alone in their courage. They also relied on hope, the small, stubborn hope that someone would come for them. In the back of Lila's mind, she imagined the cowboy they had heard about in the town. Whispers had reached them, rumors of a man who could appear out of nowhere and solve impossible problems. Though they did not know his face, Lila felt a strange reassurance at the thought that someone like him might be watching, waiting for the right moment. Their captors, posing as wealthy businessmen, kept them under constant but subtle control. They were polite in tone but strict in their rules, creating a sense of false safety that only increased the sisters' alertness. Meals were brought to them, and they were allowed small walks under supervision, but freedom was never given. Lila noticed everything: the placement of the guards, the way the gates were locked, the way the guards communicated silently. She stored each detail in her memory, knowing it could be useful for escape. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Anaya leaned close to Lila. "Do you think anyone is coming for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her brown eyes were wide with worry, but her lips pressed tightly together, holding back tears. "They will," Lila said firmly, though her own heart pounded with uncertainty. "We have to trust that someone sees us. And even if they don't, we'll find a way ourselves. We've faced hard things before. We can do it again." Anaya nodded slowly, drawing strength from her sister's calm words. She knew Lila was right. Panic would only make things worse. Together, they began to plan. They observed the guards, studied the compound, and mapped the paths in their minds. Every small detail became a potential lifeline. A loose board, a weak lock, the guard who liked to nap in the sun. At night, when the compound was quiet, the sisters whispered to each other about freedom. They imagined the canyon, the wind in their hair, the open sky. Lila imagined riding horses, feeling the strength of their legs beneath her as they galloped to safety. Anaya imagined seeing their family again, feeling the warmth of home after days of fear and uncertainty. These thoughts were more than dreams. They were fuel for courage. Meanwhile, outside the compound, Jack Hayes continued his careful observation. From a hidden ridge, he watched the guards, studied the terrain, and planned his approach. He was patient, knowing that rushing in could put the sisters in greater danger. His mind was sharp, calculating every possibility. He noted when the guards changed shifts, when they relaxed, and when they became more alert. He noticed small details the kidnappers probably overlooked: a loose board on the fence, a weak spot in the gate, a shadow that could provide cover. Jack understood something the sisters could not yet see. The danger extended beyond the compound. These men were part of a network, a group with connections that could reach beyond the town. Their motives were unclear, but their methods were ruthless. Jack had seen cruelty before, but he had also learned that courage and cleverness could turn the tide. He would need both to save the sisters. Back in the compound, the sisters took small risks to gather information. Lila carefully approached the window one evening, peering through the slats to see the layout outside. She counted the guards, memorized the paths they walked, and noted the wagon's positions. Anaya, curious and daring, tried to listen to the men's conversations, catching fragments of plans and words that hinted at the broader conspiracy. Over time, the sisters began to communicate secretly with each other using small signals. A slight tap on the floor, a raised eyebrow, a subtle movement of the hand. All became a language of their own. They learned to move quietly, coordinate their actions, and understand each other's intentions without speaking. Lila's careful mind guided their plans, while Anaya's courage carried them through moments of fear. One day, while the guards were distracted with a delivery, Lila noticed an opening. The gate had been left slightly ajar, and one guard had wandered too far from his post. Her heart raced. Could this be the moment to escape? She looked at Anaya, whose eyes shone with a mix of fear and excitement. "We have to be careful," Lila whispered. "We move only if we are sure." Anaya nodded. She trusted her sister completely, and together they waited, watching the shadows, timing each step. They knew that freedom was within reach, but danger was everywhere. One mistake could ruin everything. They practiced moving silently in the small spaces of the compound, testing the weak points they had observed. Each small movement, each cautious step, was part of the larger plan to survive. As evening fell, the compound grew quiet. The men were tired from the day's work, their attention divided. Lila and Anaya whispered again about what they would do if they escaped. They imagined running through the canyon, hiding in the rocks, and finding someone to help them. They knew that escape would not be easy. They would need guidance, skill, and perhaps a stranger with courage beyond measure. Little did they know, someone was already watching. Someone who had studied the same patterns, calculated the same risks, and prepared to act. Jack Hayes had been patient, and he had learned everything he needed. He understood the timing, the shadows, and the paths that could lead to safety. The sisters' resilience, intelligence, and courage had not gone unnoticed. Their determination to survive gave him confidence that they could make it through the night if he intervened carefully. The night deepened, the moon rising over the canyon, casting silver light on the rocks. The sisters sat quietly in the corner, hearts pounding, listening to the distant sounds of the guards. Lila whispered a final word to Anaya. "Stay calm. We've prepared. We will survive this." Anaya nodded, gripping her sister's hand tightly. In the darkness, fear mixed with hope. The sisters were trapped, yet their courage burned brightly, guiding them through the shadows. They did not yet know the man who would come to their aid, the cowboy who would risk everything to save them. But deep inside, a sense of hope stirred, fragile but unbroken, a promise that freedom was possible, that they could face danger and live to tell their story. And somewhere beyond the ridge, hidden from view, Jack Hayes adjusted his stance, his eyes never leaving the sisters. He waited for the right moment, knowing that patience, careful observation, and courage were the keys to success. The night was long, and danger was close, but the lone cowboy was ready. He would not fail. The sisters would not face this night alone. In the stillness, the canyon seemed to hold its breath, the wind whispering secrets through the rocks. The stage was set for action, for bravery, for a test of wit and courage. And as the moonlight danced on the compound walls, the sisters, unaware of the lone cowboy's presence, prepared themselves for the night that could change everything. Night had fallen over the canyon, and a cool breeze swept through the rocks. The stars sparkled faintly in the clear sky, offering a silent witness to the events unfolding below. Jack Hayes crouched behind a boulder, his sharp eyes trained on the compound where the sisters were being held. He had spent days observing every detail, the guards' shifts, the weak spots in the fence, and the girls' movements. Now, the moment for action had finally arrived. Jack's heart was steady, but his mind worked quickly. Every move had to be calculated. He checked his rifle, making sure it was ready if needed, though he hoped it would not come to that. His plan was not to fight unless absolutely necessary. His priority was the girl's safety. He studied the shadows cast by the moonlight, identifying the paths that would allow him to move close to the compound unnoticed. Inside the compound, Leela and Anaya had sensed that something might change that night. The air felt different, charged with possibility. Lila whispered to her sister, "Stay close to me and be ready to move when I say." Anaya nodded, her hands gripping Lila's. They had prepared for this moment in their minds and hearts, studying every detail of their surroundings, memorizing every guard's position. Jack began his approach, moving silently from rock to rock. The ground was uneven and covered in small stones that could easily give away his position. He paused frequently, listening to the guards' distant conversations, making sure no one was watching. Each step required patience and careful timing. One wrong move could alert the kidnappers and endanger the sisters' lives. As he neared the compound, he noticed a small opening in the fence, a weak spot he had identified during his observations. It would allow him to slip inside without being seen. He crawled carefully through the shadows, his body close to the ground. His instincts told him exactly when to pause and when to move. He had done this countless times before, but never for two lives as precious as these. Inside the compound, the sisters were tense but ready. Lila had decided that when the opportunity came, they would move quickly and quietly to the weak spot in the fence. She whispered instructions to Anaya, reminding her to stay calm and follow her lead. The girls had grown more confident in their ability to survive, but they knew that escaping was only the first step. They still needed someone strong and smart to guide them to safety. Jack reached the fence and inspected the opening. It was just as he had remembered, a narrow gap that could fit a person through if they moved carefully. He signaled silently, knowing the sisters would understand when the time came. He waited for the guards to turn their attention elsewhere, watching as they moved between the wagons, some laughing, some distracted. The moonlight provided enough visibility for him to navigate, but not enough for the guards to see him. Finally, the moment arrived. One of the guards had wandered too far, distracted by a small fire. Jack moved swiftly through the gap in the fence, landing softly on the other side. His eyes immediately found the sisters. Lila recognized him instantly, not because she had seen him before, but because she had imagined him in her mind, the man who could appear when hope seemed distant. She whispered, "It's him," and Anaya's eyes widened in relief. Jack nodded, a silent reassurance. He approached the girls slowly, careful not to startle them. "We need to move now," he said quietly, his voice calm and steady. "Stay close to me and follow my lead. We have to be fast and careful." Lila and Anaya did not hesitate. They had trusted this moment, prepared for it, and now it had arrived. The three of them moved together, shadows among shadows, keeping low to the ground. The sisters followed Jack's lead, their hearts racing, but their minds focused. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. They passed the first guard without being noticed, then slipped past the wagons, moving closer to the edge of the compound. The night was silent except for the occasional rustle of the wind and the soft whisper of their breathing. As they reached the outer edge, a guard noticed a shadow moving near the fence. He called out, and another guard turned in their direction. Jack froze, calculating his next move. The sisters pressed against the ground, trusting him completely. With quick thinking, Jack grabbed a small stone and tossed it away from their position. The guards turned toward the sound, allowing Jack and the sisters to slip through the weak spot in the fence and into the safety of the canyon's rocky terrain. Once outside the compound, Jack led them through a narrow path between jagged rocks. The sisters' relief was visible, but they knew they were not yet safe. The guards would soon realize they had escaped and would pursue them. Jack moved quickly, yet carefully, ensuring that the sisters did not stumble or make noise. Lila and Anaya followed closely, trusting his guidance completely. As they navigated the canyon, Jack began to learn more about the conspiracy that had led to their capture. He had overheard fragments of conversation in the days before the rescue. Talk of powerful men planning to manipulate resources and eliminate anyone who knew their secrets. The sisters had witnessed hints of this as well, though they did not understand the full scope. Together they began to piece together the puzzle, realizing that their escape was only the beginning. Hours passed as they moved through the rugged terrain, the moonlight guiding their path. The sisters were exhausted, but Jack's calm presence gave them strength. He spoke softly, offering encouragement and advice. "We're almost safe," he said. "Keep moving, stay quiet, and trust me. You're both doing very well." Lila and Anaya nodded, drawing courage from his words. At one point they encountered a small stream, the water glistening in the moonlight. Jack led them across carefully, ensuring that their footprints would be hidden. The sound of running water was a challenge, but the sisters moved as silently as possible. They were learning from Jack, gaining skills and confidence even as fear lingered in the back of their minds. As they reached a higher ridge, Jack paused and looked back. The compound was far behind them now, But the danger was not completely gone. He could see faint lights moving in the distance, the guards searching, calling out, and attempting to follow. "We need to reach the trees on the far side," Jack said. "There's cover there and we can rest for a short while before moving on." The sisters followed, their bodies aching from the escape, but their spirits lifted by the promise of safety.
Lila whispered a quiet thank you, though Jack only nodded.
Words were not necessary. Action spoke louder. Anaya smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the trust and gratitude she felt. Finally, they reached the cover of a dense grove of trees. Jack instructed them to sit quietly, catch their breath, and stay alert. He kept watch, scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. The sisters huddled together, relief washing over them, but they remained vigilant. They knew their journey was not yet over. Jack spoke to them softly, explaining what he had learned about the kidnappers' network. He told them that the danger extended beyond the compound and that powerful people were involved. The sisters listened carefully, understanding for the first time that their rescue was only the beginning of a larger battle. They needed to stay strong, gather information, and eventually help expose the truth. As the night deepened, Jack shared a simple meal he had carried with him. The sisters ate quietly, grateful for the sustenance and the comfort of having someone strong to guide them. They whispered to each other about what had happened, processing the fear and the relief, and making plans for the next steps. Hours later, as dawn approached, Jack led them further into the canyon, ensuring that no one could follow them. The sisters were exhausted but determined to survive. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. They had trusted a stranger, and he had proven himself worthy. By the time the first light of morning painted the canyon walls in shades of gold, Jack, Leela, and Anaya had reached a secure spot where they could rest. The sisters were safe for now, but the larger threat still loomed. The network that had kidnapped them was dangerous, and Jack knew that exposing it would require courage, skill, and careful planning. But in that quiet moment as the sun rose over the canyon, the sisters felt hope. They had survived the night, escaped the compound, and placed their trust in a man who risked everything for them. They were free, for now, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.
Jack looked at the sisters, pride and determination in his eyes.
He knew their journey was far from over, but he also knew that together they could overcome the danger, uncover the conspiracy, and ensure that justice was served. The lone cowboy had rescued the sisters, but their story was just beginning. The canyon was alive with possibilities, danger, and courage, and as they moved forward, the bond between the cowboy and the sisters grew stronger, built on trust, bravery, and the shared goal of surviving against all odds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the town as Jack Hayes led the sisters carefully through the outskirts. Lila and Anaya had survived the night in the canyon, but the danger was far from over. The men who had kidnapped them were connected to a larger network, one that extended deep into the town and involved powerful people who would do anything to protect their secrets. Jack knew that simply rescuing the sisters was not enough. They had to expose the conspiracy before it could harm anyone else. The sisters were quiet, absorbing the fresh air, and letting their legs rest from the long journey through the canyon. Lila's mind was racing, thinking about how they could help bring the kidnappers to justice. Anaya, still full of nervous energy, kept glancing around, half in awe at their freedom and half in fear of being followed. Jack walked slightly ahead, keeping watch, his eyes sharp for any signs of pursuit. Jack's first priority was to find trustworthy allies. The sheriff had proven unreliable in the past, but he knew of one deputy who was honest and courageous. His name was Tom Reynolds, a man who had always valued justice above politics. Jack also thought of the local journalist, Maria Lopez, who had a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. Together, these allies could provide the support needed to gather evidence and confront the conspirators. By midday, they had reached the edge of town. Jack moved the sisters to a safe location, a small hidden cabin owned by an old friend who owed him a favor. Here, they could rest briefly and plan their next steps without being noticed. Lila and Anaya quickly drank water and ate some food, their energy returning slowly. They looked at Jack with gratitude, realizing how much he had done for them, not just in saving their lives, but also in giving them hope. Jack began to explain what he knew about the conspiracy. "These men are not just kidnappers," he said quietly. "They are part of a network that controls parts of this town. They have connections to businesses, officials, and people who think they are untouchable. They wanted you out of the way because you knew too much, and they believed no one could stop them." Lila listened carefully, her mind sharp and focused. She understood that exposing the truth would be difficult, but she also realized that their experience inside the compound had given them valuable knowledge. Every detail they had observed, the guards' routines, the secret meeting spots, the coded messages, could be used to bring the conspirators to justice. Anaya, though younger and more impulsive, nodded in agreement. She felt a strong determination to help, despite the fear that lingered from their ordeal. Jack contacted Deputy Tom Reynolds first. Tom was cautious but immediately understood the severity of the situation after hearing Jack's account. Together, they began gathering evidence, combining Jack's observations with the sisters' knowledge of the kidnappers' methods. Maria Lopez, the journalist, agreed to help document everything and prepare a public report once they had enough proof. The process was slow and meticulous. Every piece of evidence had to be verified, and every witness protected. The conspirators were powerful and could strike back if they sensed exposure. Jack and the sisters worked quietly, moving only when necessary, always alert to danger. The sisters' courage and intelligence proved invaluable. Lila carefully analyzed patterns in the kidnappers' behavior, while Anaya gathered small clues that might have seemed insignificant, but together formed a clear picture. Over several days, the team uncovered alarming details. The kidnappers were planning to manipulate local businesses and land deals, using intimidation and secret threats to control others. They were ruthless, and anyone who opposed them faced danger. The sisters' first-hand experience was critical, as they had seen the network's operations up close. Their observations gave the authorities the evidence they needed to begin legal action. As the investigation progressed, the conspirators began to sense that something was amiss. One evening, a man in a dark suit appeared near the cabin, surveying the area. Jack quickly noticed and warned everyone to stay quiet. They watched as the man moved on, seemingly unaware of their presence. This incident reinforced the urgency of acting carefully, ensuring that their plan to expose the conspiracy would not be discovered prematurely. Jack and the sisters decided to confront the conspirators indirectly first. They worked with Maria to gather public records, financial documents, and witness testimonies. Lila and Anaya, despite their recent trauma, were determined to help. They carefully recounted what they had witnessed, including the routines, the secret communications, and the identities of key members. Their courage amazed Jack. He had expected bravery, but their intelligence and composure under pressure were exceptional. Finally, the team prepared to act. Jack, the sisters, Deputy Tom, and Maria organized a plan to present the evidence to the sheriff, the public, and local authorities. They knew it would be risky. The conspirators were influential and could try to intimidate or silence them. But they had no choice. Justice demanded courage, and the sisters, along with Jack, were ready to face the challenge. The day of action arrived. Jack led the sisters to the town hall, staying vigilant as they approached. Maria had prepared documents and recordings, while Deputy Tom coordinated with trustworthy officers. As the conspirators began to realize that their plan was unraveling, tension filled the air. Jack could sense the unease among them, their confidence fading as they realized their control was slipping. Inside the town hall, the sisters spoke first. Lila detailed the events at the compound, describing the patterns of the guards, the methods used to hold them captive, and the threats they had witnessed. Anaya added her perspective, highlighting the courage and resourcefulness they had needed to survive. Their voices were steady, clear, and honest. Every word strengthened the case against the conspirators, leaving no doubt about their wrongdoing. Jack presented additional evidence, showing how the network operated, the connections to local businesses, and the strategies used to intimidate and manipulate. Deputy Tom provided official documentation, reinforcing the sisters' testimony with verifiable facts. Maria recorded everything, ensuring the story could reach the public, creating transparency and accountability. The conspirators attempted to interrupt and discredit the testimony, but the combination of first-hand accounts, evidence, and official records was overwhelming. The sheriff, recognizing the weight of the proof and the courage of those involved, authorized immediate action. Officers moved quickly to apprehend the main conspirators, ensuring the town's safety while preventing further attempts to cover up the crimes. The sisters, though exhausted, felt a profound sense of relief. They had survived the kidnapping, escaped danger, and now played a pivotal role in exposing a network of corruption and crime. Their courage had not only saved themselves but also protected countless others in the town who might have been affected by the conspirators' schemes. Jack watched quietly, his pride quiet but deep. He had guided the sisters to safety and helped bring justice, but he also knew that the experience had changed them. Lila and Anaya were stronger, wiser, and more confident in their ability to face challenges. The town had witnessed their bravery, and the conspirators had been held accountable. Justice had been served, but it had come at a cost of effort, courage, and resilience. As the day ended, the sisters were reunited with friends and family. Tears, hugs, and laughter filled the air as the community celebrated their return. The ordeal had left scars, but it had also created bonds that could never be broken. Jack, quietly watching from a distance, knew his work was done, for now. He had ensured their safety, guided them through danger, and helped reveal the truth. The town began to heal. The conspirators faced trial, and the community felt a renewed sense of security and trust. People spoke of the sisters' bravery and the cowboy who had risked everything to protect them. Lila and Anaya, though still processing their experiences, knew that they had played an important role in restoring justice. They had survived fear, faced danger, and emerged stronger. Jack Hayes, the lone cowboy, remained a quiet figure in the background. He had no desire for fame or recognition. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had made a difference, that 2 lives had been saved, and that the town was safer because of his actions. The sisters would remember him forever, not just as a rescuer, but as a symbol of courage, skill, and unwavering determination. As night fell over the town, Jack prepared to leave. The sisters waved quietly, gratitude shining in their eyes. Lila whispered, "Thank you for everything." Anaya added, "We will never forget you." Jack nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Without a word, he mounted his horse and rode toward the horizon, disappearing into the twilight. The town settled into a peaceful night, the shadows of danger replaced by the glow of hope and justice. The sisters, stronger and wiser, knew that life had given them a second chance. Jack's actions had ensured not only their safety, but also the exposure of a deadly conspiracy. Courage, intelligence, and determination had won the day, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and bravery could triumph. And so, the story of Jack Hayes and the Apache sisters became a tale of courage, resilience, and justice. It was a story that would be told for years to come, reminding everyone that even in the face of danger, ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges, and that heroes sometimes came quietly, riding through the shadows, making the world a better place without asking for anything in return. The town slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Life moved forward, though the memory of the recent danger lingered in the minds of its people. Lila and Anaya walked through familiar streets, their heads held high, proud of the courage that had carried them through days of fear and uncertainty. They had faced unimaginable danger and survived, but more than that, they had helped expose a dangerous conspiracy that threatened the safety of everyone in the town. The sisters were no longer the same as before. Lila's eyes reflected a quiet strength, a determination that had grown in the crucible of their ordeal. She spoke carefully, measured her words, and carried herself with confidence. Anaya, still spirited and daring, had learned patience and careful thinking. She had faced fear head-on and come out stronger. Both sisters were wiser, and their bond had deepened through shared struggle. They understood each other in ways that only those who survive together can. Jack Hayes had returned to the edges of town only briefly. He observed from a distance as the sisters were reunited with family and friends. Tears and laughter filled the air as hugs were exchanged and worried questions were answered. The sisters' parents were overcome with gratitude, yet also humility. They knew that Jack had risked everything to save their daughters, and that courage was a gift that could never be fully repaid. In the town hall, the sheriff thanked the sisters, Jack, Deputy Tom, and Maria Lopez, for their bravery and dedication. The arrests of the conspirators had brought relief and a renewed sense of justice. The official spoke publicly about the need to remain vigilant, to protect the town from those who would exploit fear for personal gain. The sisters' testimony and the evidence gathered had been pivotal. Without them, the conspirators might have continued their dangerous plans undisturbed. Yet even in the safety of the town, whispers remained. Some of the conspirators' allies tried to sow doubt, claiming that the sisters' accounts were exaggerated, but the evidence was undeniable. Documents, recorded conversations, witness statements, and the detailed recollections of the sisters themselves left no room for doubt. Jack had ensured that their story would be backed by facts, and Maria Lopez was preparing to publish a detailed account that would reach beyond the town, showing the world the courage and resilience of those involved. The sisters spent days recovering, regaining strength and adjusting to life after the ordeal. Lila returned to school, her mind sharper than ever, determined to learn everything she could. She felt a sense of responsibility to use her knowledge wisely, knowing that courage alone was not always enough. One needed intelligence and awareness to make a difference. Anaya, too, returned to her studies, but she approached life with a new sense of caution and patience. She still had her lively spirit, but it was tempered with wisdom gained from experience. Jack did not stay long in the town. He had no desire for recognition or celebration. He had acted out of principle, guided by a quiet sense of justice and responsibility. Still, the sisters insisted on seeing him one last time. They found him at the edge of town, near the canyon where their ordeal had begun. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, the canyon stretching behind Jack and the rising sun painting the sky in brilliant colors. Lila spoke first. "We will never forget what you did for us," she said softly. Her voice carried gratitude, respect, and admiration. Anaya added, "You saved our lives, and you helped us make sure others would be safe too. We can never thank you enough." Jack nodded, his eyes calm but serious. "You don't need to thank me," he said simply. "You were brave, smart, and strong. I only helped guide the way. You did most of it yourselves." His words humbled the sisters, and they understood that true courage often meant working together and trusting those who guided them. Before leaving, Jack gave them a small piece of advice. "Life will bring challenges," he said. "Sometimes danger will come quietly, and sometimes it will be obvious. But remember what you learned. Trust yourself, stay alert, and never underestimate the power of courage and intelligence together. And always protect each other." With that, Jack mounted his horse. The sisters watched as he rode toward the horizon, the wind catching his hat, the horse's hooves kicking up dust that sparkled in the sunlight. He did not look back, but his presence lingered in their minds, a symbol of bravery, skill, and unwavering principle. He was a hero, not because he sought recognition, but because he acted when it mattered most. The sisters returned to their family, resuming life while carrying the lessons of their experience. They shared their story carefully with friends and neighbors, ensuring that others would understand the courage, intelligence, and determination it took to survive. They emphasized that bravery was not about reckless action, but about careful thinking, resilience, and trust in those who acted with integrity. The town, too, began to heal. Life returned to a rhythm of markets, school days, and quiet evenings. The arrests of the conspirators had restored safety, and people spoke of the bravery of the sisters and the mysterious cowboy who had saved them. His name became part of the town's legend, not as a figure seeking fame, but as a quiet guardian whose actions had saved lives and revealed the truth. Even as life returned to normal, the sisters and Jack knew that danger could appear again, sometimes where least expected. They had learned that courage and vigilance were ongoing responsibilities, not one-time acts. Lila and Anaya grew stronger because of it. prepared for the future and committed to helping others when possible. Their experience had shaped them into individuals who would not be afraid to stand for justice and truth, no matter the challenges. In the weeks that followed, the sisters visited Deputy Tom and Maria Lopez to ensure the story was fully documented. The journalist worked tirelessly, interviewing the sisters, recording details, and creating a narrative that would honor their bravery while exposing the conspiracy. The sisters' testimony, combined with the collected evidence, became a cornerstone of local history, a story of courage, survival, and justice that would inspire others for years to come. Jack watched from a distance, satisfied. He had played his part, guiding the sisters to safety and ensuring that justice prevailed. Yet he remained the lone cowboy, moving quietly through the landscape, ready to act wherever he was needed. His journey was not finished, but the lives he had touched in this town had been forever changed for the better. The sisters often thought of him in the months that followed, especially when challenges arose. They remembered his calm presence, his intelligence, and his unwavering courage. It became a source of inspiration, teaching them that even ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. They had seen it firsthand, and it had changed the way they approached life, danger, and responsibility. Time passed, and the town thrived. The sisters continued their education, contributed to their community, and shared lessons learned from their experiences. People often spoke of the brave girls who had survived a kidnapping, exposed a conspiracy, and helped restore justice. And though Jack Hayes rarely appeared in town, his legacy lived on through the actions of those he had saved. One evening, as the sun set over the canyon, the sisters stood together, looking toward the horizon where Jack had ridden away. The wind carried a quiet sense of peace, a reminder of their freedom and the courage that had guided them through danger. Lila and Anaya knew that life would continue to test them, but they also knew that they were strong enough to face anything. They had survived the impossible, learned the value of courage, and discovered the strength that comes from trusting and helping one another. Jack Hayes riding into the horizon remained a symbol of bravery and quiet heroism. He did not seek recognition, but his actions had changed lives, saved the sisters, and exposed a deadly conspiracy. His story, intertwined with theirs, became a legend whispered through the town, a reminder that courage, intelligence, and resilience could overcome even the greatest threats. As night fell, the sisters returned home, their hearts lightened by safety and hope. The town slept peacefully, knowing that justice had been served, and that ordinary people, guided by courage and trust, could make an extraordinary difference. The story of Jack Hayes and the Apache sisters ended with freedom, justice, and a promise that courage, even in the darkest times, could light the way. And so the lone cowboy rode on, leaving behind a town transformed, two sisters stronger than ever, and a legacy of heroism that would inspire generations. The story was complete, yet its lessons lived on. Proof that bravery, cleverness, and perseverance could triumph over fear, danger, and corruption, creating hope where it had almost been lost. Air safe, and the danger was exposed.